Okay, so you've got your paper, 5 body paragraphs drafted, an intro that defines the terms, you've drafted a thesis. Now it's time to write a conclusion. So let's start with the rubric. It's really important that you understand that this paper does not have a summarize what you've already said conclusion. What we're doing in the conclusion of this paper is something unique. We're looking forward. So the conclusion asks you to answer this question: how does where America is today on the cultural discussion you've discussed compare with where America was during the late 19th century, or really whatever period that you're looking at? So if some of your authors cross over into the early 20th. But basically, we want to compare where are we now with where were we in the period that you were looking at. So how does what the authors you're exploring say about the tension compare with your opinion of where we are today? Another way to look at that is presented on the right side of the rubric. And on that side, you're reminded to avoid summarizing what you've already said. It's a relatively short paper. We've had really clear claim sentences and a really clear thesis. What we want to do here is explore and explain the differences and similarities you see between the eras. How similar are we? How different are we than these earlier writers? And explain, why do you think what you think? Why are you taking the position on the issue that you are taking? And that's how you can write a nice, big, fat, rich conclusion that's actually interesting, that actually asks you to take this experience you've had looking at the literature of the past and use it as a lens to look at today. So let's take a quick look at what Brian does with his conclusion. So Brian actually takes a very personal approach, and you're welcome to do this. You're going to notice he writes his conclusion in first person, and he talks about where he thinks we are today via his own personal struggle with these questions. And to me, this is an intriguing approach to the conclusion. You don't have to get this personal. You can just talk about what you think is happening in America more generally. So instead of getting into this personal experience, Brian could have just talked about how he saw the struggle between intellectual reason and religious faith playing out in late 20th, early 21st century American culture. You, for example, could look at our current election and see how that is playing out, something like that. But he decided to take a very personal route and explore his own struggle with these two patterns and his own effort to find his place in them and figure them out. And you'll notice that at different points he goes back and contrasts himself with characters or statements from the writers. So here he compares himself to Sonny. And he ends up with a conclusion that sort of compares his own experience of the struggle with faith and reason to Sonny's, who is a character from Sonny's Blues, a story we're actually going to read later this semester. So that's a unique kind of conclusion. Brian works at it from a personal angle. You don't have to do that. You can just talk about the patterns you see in contemporary American culture. But what Brian thought he wanted to do was use his personal experience as the lens to talk about those patterns, and that's fine. But I just want to reiterate, you don't have to go personal like this. You can just talk from a third-person, more objective standpoint of what you think you see in American culture. Okay, hope that gives you some ideas. Again, with the conclusion, feel free to reach out with questions via email, text, or phone message. See you in Blackboard.